Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the review of Gundam Breaker 3, a game published by BandaiNamco and developed by Crafts&Meister for Sony's PlayStation 4 and Vita. The basic premise of Gundam Breaker is born from the three Gundam Builders anime series, where modelers can pilot their creations in virtual reality battles. None of the three Gundam Breaker games tapped directly into those series and instead created their own world. In Gundam Breaker's 3 case, the story is set in a hopefully not so distant future where humanity build an orbital elevator and Gunpla battles are a worldwide phenomenon. You, as a silent protagonist, are approached by Misa, a young girl that recruits you for her Gunpla team. Her goal is to save the shopping district where her father's model shop is by winning the Gunpla Japanese Cup. Compared to Gundam Breaker 2, the story here is much shorter, only 5 chapters. The animations that make Gundam Breaker 2's story so enjoyable have mostly been replaced by visual novel-like parts with the usual series of static portraits talking to each other. The story itself is very diluted in these 5 chapters, usually progressing during the first and last missions of each, and this is where in-game animations are usually played, and those do a much better job in drawing players in. When the game actually shows the story, it's surprisingly good because it goes completely bonkers. Pardon the spoiler for the ending, but it's the best way to explain how WTF the story goes. You can skip ahead if you want. So, the team gets on the orbital elevator after winning the Japan Cup, but the AI controlling the station goes haywire due to a virus. The team hacks into the orbital elevator's AI with the help of an apple pie, because apples contain silicon, and inject a Gunpla battle program to destroy the virus. The AI goes berserk on the team and unleashes a Neo Zeong, able to summon a colonizer in a spectacular final battle. But it's not over yet, because the orbital elevator is being pulled outside its orbit by an unpurged counterweight, so a working RX-78 is launched into orbit. Your character and Misa climb into it, and they save the orbital elevator. The end. Did you skip the spoiler part? Well, let me reiterate that when the story is on it's fun to follow, but due to its presentation it fails to tie the various missions and chapters together. Gundam Breaker 3 follows the usual structure of chapters composed by a bunch of missions where you fight other builders and collect parts to upgrade your own model. For the first playthrough you are limited to high-grade parts. Master-grade parts are unlocked after completing the story once and facing the newly available Extreme Difficulty mode. Stock kits unlock at a much slower rate too. After completing the story once, I had about a third of the total high-grade kits available and no stock master-grade kits. Collected parts more than made up for that, but it also meant that I changed my model less often than in the 2 other games. Less variety seems to be a constant of Gundam Breaker 3. Mission types are only a handful and all revolve around the destruction of some objects or all opposing models. The most original mission type is Core Assault, when you're and an opposing team alternate in defending an energy core. However, like all other mission modes, Core Assault falls prey to an incredibly rigid mission structure. The enemy core cannot be damaged until all opponents are down, and the core restores its barrier after a preset amount of damage. After that you have to put down your enemies once again and continues this back and forth until the game wants you to. This happens 2-3 times per mission, and of course there is the part when you defend your core. Not that you really need to defend your core, as enemies are much more concerned in attacking you than your core, that lacks a barrier like your enemies. All other missions follow the same structure. 2-3 groups of cannon fodder enemies, then a group of 3-4 stronger enemies, and eventually 2-3 custom models. Certain missions will end with one further encounter, 2 particularly powerful stock models. End of chapter missions will have 1 mobile armor in addition to all that. The result are overly long missions, and every new section is met with angst because you know you'll play in the same environment you've seen way too many times against cookie-cutter enemies that are just there to fill up your special meter. A recent patch at the time of this review greatly cut enemy health, making things much more bearable in all difficulty modes, especially in extreme, but only mitigates the problem. Only the mobile armors you'll face at the end of a chapter offer a brief respite, but they themselves come from previous games using the same attack patterns. In the whole game I can point out 2 chapters that I truly enjoyed. The SD Knight Castle fight and the final boss, because both are new and they show that developers could have done something much more elaborate. Instead, missions in Gundam Breaker 3 feel like filler material for the handful of missions with actual story development, and this hurts the game a lot. At higher difficulty levels, Gundam Breaker 3 can actually be fun, requiring you to sprint between enemies, poking them and carefully use your special moves. This doesn't change the fact that missions are way too long and that enemies gang on you all the times, with your AI companions being there to resurrect you in case you go down. The respawn system has been tweaked to make it less frustrating. After being knocked down, there is no time limit in which allies can resurrect you. Should no one come to your help within 5 seconds, you can spend one of the 4 retry tickets to get back into the action with all special actions and consumables replenished. Extreme mode might be fun to play, but you can only do that after completing the game once, and I couldn't be bothered going through the same stages and missions one more time just to unlock master grade parts. Stages also got hit pretty hard, both in number and quality. A lot of these stages here have been taken from the 2 previous games with little to no modification, aside from the multitude of invisible walls on all kinds of pitfalls, even when there is solid terrain beneath. There are new stages, but they are either flat arenas or generic-looking environments like icy caverns or underground bases. Their number is so limited that almost every chapter has to reuse environments multiple times, and it gets boring very quickly. Peculiar backdrops, like the Gundam Cafe or the SD Knight Castle, are used once in the entire game, all light modes included. Gundam Breaker 2's main problem with stage design was that it would respawn you at the beginning of a stage if you fell down a pit, and that could have easily been solved. Instead, Crafts&Meister decided to flatten stages and remove any kind of navigation and environmental hazards. And oh, so much can be done with Gundam. There are so many iconic environments ranging from Earth to space that going for generic colony in ruins instead is criminal. Story missions aside, there are 2 new single-player modes, Bounty Hunter and Challenger. In Bounty Hunter you select 2 models done by other players and face them in a battle to get their pieces. Bounty Hunter is like playing against custom models in a story mission set to extreme, which can lead to some intense and fun battles. Rewards are pretty good, although this mode doesn't evolve into a proper 2v2 mode to avoid taking the spotlight from Gundam Versus. Challenger pits your model against a series of enemy waves where you try to destroy as many enemies as possible before the timer runs out. Multiplayer makes its return, and it's the same as the previous games. Teams are up to 4 players and you play through story missions. Online is very smooth, and actually makes missions more bearable as human players always gang up on single enemies making short work of them. The only problem is that most players go for locked rooms, and open rooms often fail to attract 4 people. If there aren't enough players, AI characters will replace them. Combat is essentially unchanged. It's a button masher with few basic combos based on the equipped weapon and special attacks. New to these games are weapons effect, like ice to freeze enemies or poison. Controls are good for the most part, but just like Gundam Breaker 2, the game uses all buttons on the controller, including 4 gestures on the touchpad. Some actions are overly sensitive, like the coup de grace to kill enemies split in two. To perform that you need to tap triangle, but a lot of times this is not registered correctly and you instead perform a heavy attack, the normal function for that button. Considering the nature of the game, Gundam Breaker 3 shouldn't ask this kind of finesse, or at least having on-screen prompts take priority in controls. Parts are rated from common to legendary, based on the number of special abilities and available slots for new abilities they have. 2 parts can be joined together, improving one's standard stats, like damage or health, and allowing players to select the abilities that the result will inherit. It's also possible to join multiple parts together, but this will automatically discard extra special abilities and will only improve standard stats. Drops also include plastic bits and cubes. Plastic bits improve a part's stats, while cubes can infuse special abilities. Lastly, 2 or more different parts can be merged together to get a third, completely unrelated part. All of this can be done from a menu found in the model workshop, that otherwise hasn't received any big overhaul and it's essentially the same as in Gundam Breaker 2. Gundam Breaker 3 further expands model selection, adding more recent series like Age and Reconquista in G. From some reason models from Build Fighters, Origin and Iron-Blooded Orphans aren't present, but models from Thunderbolt are. Of course, I'm not considering DLC. Available scales are high grade and master grade, no mention to real grades, the new Reborn 100 or SD kits. The lack of SD kits is the biggest omission, given that you have a SD model in your team. There are multiple SD Gundams you can choose from, but these are simply given to you and can only be customized in color and expansion modules they carry. Gundam Breaker 3 is a step backward for the series. Gundam Breaker 2 was a huge jump from the first game, and I would be happy if the 3rd chapter would just build on that, offering more models, correcting its flaws, and giving more unique boss battles. There are more models, but rather than correcting flaws, developers choose to revert to a simple structure and reusing things seen in previous games with little to no change. Gundam Breaker 3 can be still fun in small doses, but it's clear that the series now needs an overhaul to keep it relevant and not just more models. I hope you have enjoyed this review and you'll stick around for more. Briareo Skarensky, over and out!
この調子で次も頑張ろう